Hello guys and welcome to class.
Yan!
Teacher Krishna here. Today we're working in the biology subject and class number 2. Let's start with our presentation and let me show you our topic in ending mind for today. Our topic is 1.02 Chemistry of Life, and the ending mind is the following. Compares the structure and functions of carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids by describing how enzymes regulate chemical reactions so that he or she can complete the module assessment correctly. It might seem a little bit complicated at first, but we're going to go step by step so we can understand each one of these terms. So don't worry about it. Here you have a summary of the activities that you need to complete. First, you need to read topic 1.02 and complete the worksheet that you are going to find at the end of the topic in Agilex. Notice that you have to download the worksheet, and there you will find all of the specifications of what you have to complete. Anyways, if you have any questions or you cannot find the worksheet in Agilex, you can let me know during the live session. Also, you need to generate a healthy eating plan based on the molecules that food contains. Alright, so we will talk a little bit more about this during our live session, but anyways, the diet plan that we're going to have is basically in order for us to eat healthier and to have better habits in our lives, especially now that we're still in quarantine. And of course, start working on the exercises before the class so you don't have a lot of homework and end up like this guy right here. Alright, so let's just jump into our topic today. And we're going to have a small introduction to chemistry of life. So, let me tell you that food contains four molecule categories. They are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. And each one of them has unique chemical properties that facilitate its processing and functionality inside cells. They all contain carbon atoms, which have the unique ability to bond together repeatedly. So, what's pretty interesting about these molecules is that you are going to find them everywhere. You can find them in the food, and we're going to have some examples later on, but you are going to see that all of them are elements that are in the periodic table that somehow start bonding together, specifically because of the properties of carbon. And sometimes it's weird because we have, let's say, the same amount of atoms. Like, I don't know, we can have like 8 atoms of carbon, 16 atoms of hydrogen, and 2 of oxygen. But depending on the way we are going to arrange those atoms, we're going to have a different molecule. That's why it makes it so interesting. All right, let's continue. And here's what I was telling you about. And we're going to start with some biological macromolecules. So we have some things that are called monomers, that are small particles that when bonding together form macromolecules. So macromolecules are basically a group of monomers or a group of molecules. Also, we have something that are called polymers, that are larger particles formed of monomers, or they're somewhat similar to macromolecules. Okay, so we're going to start with monosaccharides. And it is the smallest type of carbohydrate molecule. And the most common are glucose and fructose. So, if you remember, we mentioned that we had several categories from these particles that we were going to talk about. And some of them were carbohydrates. And we're going to have specifically 3, let's say, like subsystems inside the carbohydrates. And the smallest one is the monosaccharide. And here we have 3 examples of monosaccharides, which is what I was telling you about. Notice something interesting here. All of them have the same amount of atoms. 6 atoms of carbon, 12 atoms of hydrogen, and 6 atoms of oxygen. But what happens is that each one of them have a different name. So the first one is glucose, we have galactose and fructose right here at the end. But what happens? Why are they different? Well, again, since I mentioned that we had the same amount of atoms, the only thing that's going to change is the way the atoms are going to be arranged, or the way they are going to be in order right here. So you can pause the video for a little moment and you can observe some of the differences right there in each one of the monosaccharides that are stated in that picture. But just to guide you a little bit, notice that here we have several carbon atoms that are bonding some other connections around. Like they are bonding with oxygen as well as with hydrogen. And right now it looks like very theoretical, let's say. But in reality, like you're not going to see something like this in the real world, right? Because at the end, each carbon atom and each hydrogen as well as oxygen atom are going to have like a different shape, let's say. They are not necessarily like letters, but they are going to be just particles that are going to be bonding each other through some electromagnetic connections in between them. Right, so let's continue. And continuing with the saccharides, and they are made up of 2 monosaccharides. They are classified as simple carbohydrates. Most of them are simply referred as sugars in biology. So, well, notice that we can call them sugars because they are usually storage in energy around. And that's why it is very important that living organisms consume sugar as well as other carbohydrates in order to storage energy and use it to move or for other cognitive activities. Here we have an example of what a disaccharide looks like. So notice that in our left we have glucose and in our right we have fructose. So what happens when they bond together? They form something that is called sucrose, right? Which is a disaccharide. We're still talking about carbohydrates, okay? And this is the last one, or the last subsection from carbohydrates, which are polysaccharides. They are made up of hundreds of or thousands of monosaccharides. Even if they are made up of the same monomer, the way they are arranged changes the polymer. So we have some examples of what polysaccharides actually look like. We have starch, which is a component that plants use in order to storage glucose. You can see it right over here. And you need to take into consideration that polymers have a, let's say, a sequence, or they have a certain pattern to follow. Just like right here, you can notice that in starch, the shapes are pretty alike. Most likely they are the same, but they are bonded together in a sequence. We also have cellulose, which is the main component in plants. And it is represented right over here. And you might notice, hey, but what happens is that some of the components that we see right there are only turned upside down. That is correct. But the position or the direction in which each one of our monomers are looking toward is extremely important to form these polysaccharides. And lastly, we have the glycogen, which is what animals and fungi use to store additional glucose, which is represented right here. Again, pretty much the same pattern or the same structures, but they have a different pattern. Okay. Right, so let's continue. So these are a monosaccharide dancing and a polysaccharide dancing. You're going to notice they are pretty much the same, but also the pattern and the structure always varies. All right, let's continue, and now we're going to talk about some lipids. So lipids don't mix well in water. So let's think that right now your mother is cooking something delicious at home. Probably she's making some chicken soup. All right, so what happens with the chicken soup? Have you ever seen that when you are boiling some water with the chicken inside, there is actually like a flat layer of grace that stays at the top, something that doesn't really mix with the water? Or even when they serve you a plate of chicken soup, you are going to find that there is this layer of this orangish or yellowish material at the top, which is the grace from the chicken. So grace usually comes from lipids, and the lipids don't mix with water well. And they are not considered polymers because they are not made up of repeating structures, just like the ones we saw before with the monosaccharides and also the polysaccharides from the carbohydrates, which they had a repeating structure and pattern. In lipids, it doesn't happen. They are a little bit different. And there are certain categories here. We start with fats, which contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They are also known as they are triglycerides. There you go. That's a difficult word. Triglycerides. And they storage energy and may provide protection if surrounding vital organs. They are made up of 3 fatty acids. We're going to see a picture so we can perceive it better, but you can have it in mind. 3 fatty acids. We also have phospholipids. They are similar to fats, but slightly different in composition. They are made up of 2 fatty acids and 1 phosphate group. Lastly, we have esteroids, and they have the shape of 4 linked rings. 4 linked rings, like the ones from the Olympic Games. And they are mostly hormones that regulate body processes. And the most common one is cholesterol. Here we have an example of the ones that we had right there. The first one here are fats. It's an example of what fats look like. Just like you can see, we have 1, 2, and 3 fatty acids. All right, what happens on the right? Here we have an example of a structure of a phospholipid. And somehow they are similar because they still have 2 fatty acids, like the second and the third layer here. But the first one is not a fatty acid, it is a phosphate group. And that's why they are different between one another. Lastly, we have some of the most common ones right here, which will be cholesterol, vitamin D, cortisol, and testosterone. All right, and they are bonding together in different ways as in the previous ones. All right, let's continue. All right, now we're going to talk about proteins. And they made almost 50% of the dry weight of cells. So proteins are extremely important because they are going to create the general composition of the body in cells. And they are essentially for living organisms. Amino acids are the small particles that compose protein. They are 20 in total. And each protein has around 50 amino acids. All right, so rephrasing that, amino acids, let's imagine they are like small circles, let's say. So amino acids are going to start, getting bonded with one another. So we have like almost 50 circles of 50 amino acids. And we have all of that chain already of amino acids. That is a protein. All right. And here we have some examples in our table right there. We have a protein that can be insulin. What is the function of insulin? We have that it's a hormone for sugar metabolism. And how many amino acids does it have, or how many circles or parts does it have? It has a total of 51. So on and so forth. You can pause the video for a little moment and you can double check some examples of proteins, their functions, and how many amino acids they have. So for example, we have a myosin. The function is to produce muscle action. And imagine how many amino acids or microparts does it have? It's 6,100. That's incredible. All right, so I would like to know, what else can you find about proteins? And remember to read today's topic. All right, so in some of the pages, you're going to find some additional information about proteins, and make sure to continue reading them. Besides, of course, the activities that I told you in the beginning. So that's it for today, and I'll see you in the live session. Goodbye, guys.
Bye, have a great time.